How did we get from this...
It's not given to us to peer into the mysteries of the future.
To this.
That the basic needs of all our residents are met. Are met.
Or indeed from this.
I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
To this.
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far.
Language was once considered not just an instrument of communication, but of beauty. Actually, this is a false dichotomy. It would be truer to say that beauty, the sonic dips, dives and modulations available to the human voice, was considered a more effective instrument of communication than simply saying something as efficiently as possible. This goes back to the ancient Greek distinction between the philosophers on the one hand and the rhetorically astute sophists on the other. Plato hated sophists because he thought they were more interested in deception than truth. Truth being embodied by his teacher Socrates, who was after all sentenced on the back of a series of fine speeches. Again, though, Plato's was a false dichotomy. It would be nice to think that the public prefers an unvarnished truth to a polished lie or half-truth, but as Mark Twain said, history is strewn with thick evidence that a truth is not hard to kill, but a lie well told is immortal. In other words, form and content are one and the same. The best novels ever written could be reduced to a series of plot points and a SparkNotes summary, but the tale, for instance, of Ahab and the White Whale is in the telling. Melville did not compose in telegrams. It stands to reason, then, that anyone with a concern for the truth should care about how to make it stick in the ear and in the mind. There are countless obstacles to the learning of oratory. The first is embarrassment. I went to a state comprehensive, in American terms a public school, and in that school it was generally considered an act of suicide to speak in full sentences. This was true of pronunciation, no less. One of the girls in my psychology class once had the temerity of pronouncing the letter L in milk. This was seen as frightfully posh, and she was swiftly punished by the incessant teasing of boys and girls whose mental horizons were, shall we say, overcast. Such is life, and life is unfair. At any rate, we have certainly come a long way from the era of elocution lessons, by which entire generations were raised to speak the ideal of BBC English.
When I talk English, you hear a rhythm rather more like this. Da 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 da, a sort of Morse code rhythm.
This brogue now seems irredeemably quaint, but it once served as a means of mutual comprehension across the British Empire. English speakers from Lahore to Luton, Labrador to Liverpool could understand each other. And despite the criticisms now levelled at that ideal in the name of equality and inclusion, it proved a much more effective mechanism for climbing the greasy pole of class than the present-day strategy of live and let live. Regional accents, I grant, have an integrity and a beauty all their own, but unless they're softened and burnished by some ideal standard, they become a hindrance to mutual comprehension.
What I tried to get was a style or quality of English which would not be laughed at in any part of the country.
This is a kind of linguistic relativism to which Britain seems peculiarly prone. In France and Italy, much care is taken to instill in the young a sense of the correct way to speak. In Britain, such an idea would be thought elitist, and therefore undemocratic, and therefore political poison. A second obstacle is Strunk and White, a shorthand for the house style of college essays, creative writing courses, businesses, and late capitalistic utilitarianism generally. These style guides have done immense harm. They've convinced several generations that short words and short sentences are the only game in town. Certainly brevity is any good writer's bread and butter, but if these rules, these dicta, this orthodoxy, were applied to almost any classic text or speech, it would be shorn of everything that makes it memorable. A better style guide would instruct its readers in the use of contrasts, allow the terse to jostle with the grandiloquent. A third obstacle is the lack of living examples. Unless you're in the market for a philosophy of time,
the significance of the passage of time. There is great significance to the passage of time, and there is such great significance to the passage of time.
Or an advertisement for the ravages of time, the American political scene is about as far from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address as we in Britain are from even so recent a figure as Margaret Thatcher.
No, no, no.
Like most public figures of his day, Churchill, for instance, wrote his own speeches. He even drafted them in the form of biblical psalms, which demonstrates in what high esteem he regarded the English language. Now, of course, we have speechwriters, even the supposedly best of whom are reduced to cliché, sloganeering, and mindless repetition.
Yes, we can. Yes, we did. Yes, we can.
To return to Churchillian rhetoric may not be possible. Indeed, it may not be desirable. Even in the 1930s and 40s, Churchill's Elizabethan style was mocked by other parliamentarians. In the age of Twitter, there seems no going back from 280 characters to 28,000. But this is no argument for renouncing rhetoric. It simply means we should attend to the techniques available to us in a shorter space. Alas, this video is too short a space for a tabulation of rhetorical techniques. One of my favourites, though, is called the Latinate finish, in which the speaker begins with a series of short, simple, homely words and ends with a flourish of longer, Latin-derived words. "You ask what is our policy," said Churchill.
I will say it is to wage war by sea, land and air, with all our might and with all the strength that God can give us, to wage war against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark and lamentable catalogue of human crime.
This technique is as open to us today as it was to Churchill yesterday. So is chiasmus, in which the thrust of one clause is reversed in the next. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Or,
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
is it beyond the wit of contemporary man to apply these little grace notes of expression to his public discourse? Or to his private conversations? Or are we doomed to a sonic landscape of tumbleweed? Whatever course politicians take, and it will readily be observed that they take the wrong course with unfailing commitment, we each of us have it in our power to elevate, dare one say to civilize, the way we write and speak. As Jordan Peterson is fond of saying, those who can write and speak well are dangerous. I have my hang-ups with Mr. Peterson, but in this case he's right. I have in my own experience encountered people with rather unfortunate voices. What nature gives to Christopher Lee she takes from Anne Widdecombe, but their ability to use their voice through rhetorical techniques rescues them from being the butt of a joke and turns them into an object of admiration. In fact, Peterson and Widdecombe, one of whom sounds like Kermit the Frog and the other a broken church organ, are good examples of this. It would be remiss of me not to end on a proverbial high note, and so I leave you with this.
We are the chosen few. I can't remember it. Experiment with my voice.
Yes.
You see, this is just, it's all private. This.
Yes, quite so.
You see, I've got one of the best memories you can have.
I know, sir, but that's quite all right. Quite all right. Don't worry.